You're listening to the Live and On Board podcast with your host, Tony Milazzo. My guest today is Ronnie Brooks, the Ronnie Brooks. Ronnie Brooks. Brooks Brothers Brooks. That's right.
Not Brooks and Dunn Brooks, but Brooks
No.
Brothers.
Brooks Brothers.
Yes.
You must make a lot of money from those suits, huh?
Well, we did, yeah. But no.
You and Randy, huh?
That's right.
Pocketing all that cash.
Yes, now we're going into lawsuits. A whole lot more money to be made.
Sure is. Very L.A.
Thank you. They'll look good there.
So, yeah, Ronnie is a songwriter, musician, and a Budweiser frog.
It's true.
Is that true?
It is true, yeah. That was a nice one. I'd been doing jingles I did jingles for about 18 years as my main source of income. And one day at the studio, I had already left. I'd been there for about 11 years. I drove off and realized I'd forgotten my hat. Pulled back into the parking lot, ran into the building, and one of my buds grabbed me and said, Can you sound like a frog real quick? I said, what are you talking about? Well, it turns out he had worked with a copywriter and creative director several years ago who just called him a couple minutes ago and said, I need to present this idea to August Bush on Monday. And this was Friday afternoon. And he said, so here's what I'm thinking. I used to have a frog named Bud. And so I thought, what if he had these frogs? And they go, Budweiser, but it'll unfold and so forth. So could you get me a soundtrack for that? And my associate said, sure, no problem. And he was the voice of Bud. And our engineer, who had been at the company for maybe 6 weeks, did the voice of her and did all the mix and all the swamp noises and things that were on there.
Yeah.
And I was, Anyway, you have to have it a little bit lower. But anyway, Bud, Anyway, no, wise. I was wise. I've lost my mind.
Yeah, you were wise.
Yeah. But anyway, that was a great little run.
That was great. Wasn't that for Super Bowl or something when they released it?
We had Super Bowl ads for 5 years. And then there was several radio spots that came off of it. And
yeah,
so,
I remember it.
Yes.
That was so cool.
And I actually had some money during that phase.
Yeah.
Which I could, of course, send to colleges for my children.
Oh, good. You put your kids through college on the Budweiser frog?
It sure helped, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
Good stuff.
So worse things could happen.
Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
A lot of people would love something like that and be hunting that work.
Well,
And it just showed up. You never know.
Yeah, exactly. I walked in to the job I'd been doing and continued to do for years. But, that was a nice lick.
Yeah, great.
Well, it was funny, though, because I had a daughter who was about 15 at that time, and I would go to pick her up at the movie theater, and she'd be with a bunch of her friends, and they'd see me coming, and they'd all come down to the car, the guys especially, say, Mr. Brooks, do it. I go, wise. They go, oh, man, it sounds just like it. I said, it is it. Well, of course it sounds like it. But anyway, it was fun.
Yeah, good stuff.
Good face.
So I'd like to take it way back with you.
Yeah.
Just so everybody can hear the beginning. So for me, I was a kid when I got started, right? So,
Yes, did I.
I mean, take it back to being a kid. Like,
Yeah.
did you ever think you'd be doing any of this? And how did the road start?
I don't know that I ever thought I would do anything else. It's just all I ever felt comfortable doing. Anytime I was in school thinking about, what am I going to major in or what else could I do, nothing else appealed to me in the least except being somehow in music or show business. My dad was a fabulous piano player. He could read anything. He could play anything. He had been a music director at a radio station when all the radio stations had their own big bands. His mother was the first woman to sing on radio in Kentucky. I found out when my brother and I did our first public appearance when I was 5 and he was 8, singing for a ladies' luncheon at the Jewish Community Center in Louisville, Kentucky. And I don't know how we got that gig. We weren't Jewish. I don't know who lined us up. But anyway, I was 5, and they mentioned that about Mama being the first woman to sing. And then we had other family and show business as well. And then when I was 9, that Christmas, my brother and I both got ukuleles, and we started playing them together. And that was when the folk craze was starting up.
Yeah.
So it was just a couple of years before I had my first guitar, and we had a folk trio, and we're doing that. So I mean, I've just always been playing, and this was in Louisville. I was able to join a band. I mean, I had garage bands and stuff, but then I was able to join a band that was starting to make records. We ended up coming down here to Nashville to cut some stuff. And at that time, they still had local radio charts.
How old are you at that point?
15. And the other guys were all like freshmen in college. So I was the punk. I couldn't even drive yet. But, you know, going to gigs every weekend in the Union and all that. And,
Oh, great.
yeah, it was fun. And so I was in 10th grade on the radio, you know, having records and gigging every weekend. So that was fun. And then
So you were like 16 at that point.
I was still 15. I mean,
15.
the whole time I was in that band.
And you had songs on the radio.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Very exciting.
Good for you, Ronnie.
And we had, so my brother and I, when we had our folk group, we had been on Ted Mack Amateur Hour. That goes way back. That was like 1963. And it was recorded in New York. So we were actually in the Ed Sullivan Theater before the Beatles were.
Wow.
So, yeah, I mean, I feel very lucky to go back that far, to have references that old, and, you know, I think that's why I never could imagine doing anything else, because it's like what I'd always done. When my son started playing guitar, he was 15, and I thought, oh, that's way too old. You know, you're starting too old. You'll never. Of course, he
I
ended
had
up.
songs on the radio by then.
I don't think I held that over his head, but I just, you know, that's just the way I kind of felt, you know. But anyway, so I consider myself very fortunate.
So how did you keep yourself grounded? Was it partially your parents helping you with that? How'd you keep your head on straight?
Did I?
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. You know,
Took that for granted.
Yes, I mean, sure, it was my parents. They both came from good families, and, you know, Dad was quick to discipline, and he, I mean, like one time somebody tried to cheat me out of some money on a union gig, and Dad drove me down to the union and plugged me into the board so that we could talk about it. And I got a check for my $37, you know, and that kind of thing. But he also, like, he didn't like me wearing Beatle boots. He thought those looked too greasy and just too not appropriate for Louisville, Kentucky.
Yeah.
And but my parents were good. They were straight. They were cool people, and, you know, they appreciated music. My mom was a singer as well. She had studied opera in New York. So they got music. It didn't necessarily mean that they wanted me to be crazy. You know, all the hippie stuff that was going on, long hair, weird clothes. They wouldn't necessarily have embraced that, but they definitely embraced music.
Did you have a time to be in where you because at that point, 15, you got songs on the radio.
Yeah,
You kind of feel like your own man, right? At that point.
Well, on the weekend, you know, if we had a gig that went, you know, 8 to 12, they hoped I would be in soon after the gig.
Right.
But a lot of times, you know, that meant coming in at 2 or something.
Yeah.
Or if we played as far away as Bowling Green, which was, 150 miles or something, you know, they knew it would be late. But they trusted the guys I was playing with because they had been friends of my brother's in high school.
Yeah.
So
So you weren't checking into hotels with groupie girls already? And
I didn't say that. We did play down in Nashville one time when we came down here to record, and there was a little bit of aspirational groupieism, but, you know, but nothing really came to pass. And my brother was in Vanderbilt at that point, and so he, you know, came to see us and said, "You, by the way, need to keep a really low profile because there was a curfew at that point here in Nashville." And he said, "You don't need to be out." So I had to cool it. Yeah. But anyway, no, I mean, Mom and Dad understood I would be home when I got home. But I mean, the rest of the week, I was a student. I was a kid. I was still doing high school musicals and all that kind of stuff.
Oh,
and just
great.
making that work out. So
yeah.
anyway, but
So
I,
you've
you
done
know,
some acting and musical theater.
a little bit, yeah.
Oh, great.
I
You're
started
a thespian. I'm a thespian.
Yes. I was actually in Actors Equity Association for a while. I had my union card and everything.
Excellent.
I did, after we left high school, I keep mentioning my brother. You know my brother, Randy Brooks, who eventually wrote.
Yeah, we had him on the show.
Do what?
We had him on one of the shows.
Yeah. He eventually wrote Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer.
Right.
But up until then, he was just my brother, Randy. But anyway, we both moved to Dallas in 1969, working in theater, doing dinner theater and touring some. We were in the barbershop quartet in a production of Music Man and did that for about 6 months and came back and I did some other things. I don't know if you remember Jane Russell, the 18-hour bra girl. I did a show with her for a while. But I knew that I wasn't as good an actor as I was a musician. And I didn't aspire to be an actor like I did a musician. It was one of those things that if it happened, great. If it was an entree into me doing, having higher profile music gigs, great. But that wasn't my first thing. Being a musician was what I wanted. And so I feel fortunate to have been able to do as much with music as I was. And even then, I was playing, if I wasn't in the show, a lot of times I was in the pit band playing bass. So it was music all the time for this kid.
Yeah, great. Yeah, Randy had mentioned that he wasn't a very good guitarist and that his brother Ronnie was a much better guitarist than himself.
Yeah.
And so you got some kudos there that you can hold your own, huh?
Yeah, that's kind of him. I always refer to myself as his stunt guitar player. But I mean, we played together for a long time, and for a long time, our level of proficiency was about the same, and it didn't matter, But I always heard things that I couldn't play, and wanted to play, and so that made me search a little bit more and dig in a little bit more and made me be a better guitar player. I'd played after I moved down here. I did a lot of big band work, so yes, I am a decent guitar player. But a friend called me at one point and said Arrington Vineyard, right after it opened, was looking for somebody that could play 4 hours of solo jazz guitar. He said, "Could you do that?" And I said, "I don't think so, but let me call you back in a couple hours." So I got the songbook out from the big band, and I mean, they had there were 400, 500 tunes in there. So I knew a lot of tunes.
Yeah.
Playing them solo was a whole different deal than playing rhythm with singers or horn players or whatever. But I managed to work my way through a couple of hours worth. I figured I can repeat every couple of hours at least. So I did that, and that really boosted my guitar playing a lot because having to play the chords and the melodies and the bass line and everything, it made me a much better guitar player.
Yeah.
So, and then of course in this town, good Lord, so many great players.
Yeah, they come from everywhere.
It just does so much to raise the standard of anybody's playing.
Yeah.
If you recognize how good these other cats are, and you want to be like them, and you don't want to embarrass yourself in front of them.
Yeah.
That's a lot of it. I don't know if you're familiar with Steve Wariner. Steve is a fabulous player, and he toured with Chet Atkins for a while as his bass player for a while, and then Chet finally said, "I'm firing you because if I don't, you'll never work on your solo contract." And the next week he called Steve and said, "By the way, come down here and sign your contract with RCA." Steve's a wonderful player, wonderful singer, and he had written Garth Brooks' Long Neck Bottle, co-wrote that with Rick Carnes. And I saw him one day at Nashville down on Music Row restaurant, and as he was coming out, I saw him, and I stopped him and said, "Steve, congratulations. We used to write for the same publishing company. I'd known him for a long time." And I said, "That's a great song. I'm so proud of you and happy for you." And he said, "Oh, man, thanks, Ronnie. Ronnie, you know Chet, don't you?" And it was Chet Atkins. And I thought, I'm going to wet my pants. Well, then he says, "Chet, this is Ronnie Brooks. Ronnie's a really fine guitar player." And I thought, I can die now. To be introduced by a great guitar player to who I thought was the greatest guitar player.
Right.
Yes, I'm not a bad player, but the bar is really high in this town, and I don't ever forget that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. A lot of great musicians. So 15 years old we were at,
Yes,
right?
the old
So
man.
what happened between 15 and 20?
That was doing the theater stuff in Dallas, and I was still playing in some other bands from time to time, but at that point, 15 to 20 was mostly theater, and I mean some of that was singing waiter. So I was always working on arrangements with these other 7 or 8 people. It was sort of a new Christy minstrel kind of thing. It was usually like 4 girls and 4 guys, or it might have been 3 and 5, either way.
Yeah.
But glorified singing waiters was a lot of that. And then they would lean on us frequently to fill in the chorus parts on the shows, the extra guy, the guy on the street, or just more vocals or whatever. So those really kind of were my theater years. So I was still involved, but I was still playing a lot. I went to North Texas State University for a brief while, planning to major in upright bass. I'd hoped to go to SMU because they actually had a classical guitar major.
Yep.
But I didn't have the grades for that, and I'd never heard of North Texas State. Turned out that it was one of the best jazz departments in the country. Like Lou Marini, who played with the Blues Brothers, and Dean Parks, who was a great LA studio player, and just lots of guys graduated from that department. And I would go hear the 1 o'clock lab band practice, and that was the top lab band. And good Lord, those guys were good. They could read anything, and just, they could do it all. And so that was really inspiring. I never made it to that stage. That was my freshman year. Next semester, I did a USO tour of Vietnam.
Nice.
And I wasn't gone all semester. I was gone for about 6 weeks or so. But we spent a lot of time rehearsing prior to the tour. Got back, and I enrolled in a junior college right outside of Dallas, studied guitar and theory and things like that for a short while. But most of my stuff was really self-taught. It's like I was coming home one day and heard the first Carpenters single, Close to You. And the harmonies on that record were just so cool. And I didn't even know how to create those chords. Well, it turns out they were a major 9 chord, so it's like a major 7 with an extra added 9th in it. But I didn't know how to do that, so I had to get back into my apartment as quickly as I could so I could grab the guitar and figure out what those notes were, and much less make a move when they did wah, close to you. So I had to figure that out, and I've been blessed to always have the ear to be able to dissect most of what I hear. I mean, there's still a lot that I wouldn't give myself credit for, but so that's the kind of stuff I was doing back then. And then I moved here in '76.
How old were you?
I would have been 25.
Yeah.
Freshly married, a wife who I couldn't believe would come with me. She was from Denver, and at that point, so many musicians I knew were wanting to move to Colorado. It was the John Denver era, and Caribou Studios was out there at that point.
Yep.
And so many people were saying, "Oh, got to go to Colorado, got to get in the Rockies." And so I asked my wife one day before we moved here. I said, "How long will it be before you're going to want to move back to Denver?" And she said, "No, I've been there. I've done that. My dad was a forest ranger and ski patrol, and I've lived in the cold winters, and I don't love them. And it takes a half hour to get a kid ready to go outside and a half hour to unpack them when they get back. And you can't grow anything except for 3 months in the summer, and it's hard to build because the ground's so hard." She said, I don't have to live out there. And she has loved it here. She just has adored it because of the graciousness of the
And you're
people.
still together.
And we are still together. We just had our 50th anniversary.
Wow, congratulations.
I
That's
know.
amazing.
It is, with me only being 40.
Yeah.
No.
How's that work?
It is. It's been a good ride.
Yeah.
I'm very grateful for that.
Yeah. So she put up with you and music and
I
the whole
know.
deal.
I know.
Wow.
I keep waiting for her to say, "Enough of that." But the only time she says, and she'll never say it directly to me, but every now and then she'll say to somebody, "Yeah, he was working on this one lick, working on it, and working on it, and working on it."
For 10 years.
Do what?
For 10 years?
Well, no, it's just that 1 hour or so. But she did ask me to stop playing banjo.
Oh,
because I was trying to learn, and that's a beast of an instrument
yeah,
to play well.
yeah.
And they're loud as hell, of course.
Our audio video guy here, Wayne, behind the camera, he plays banjo,
We won't tell.
and
I mean, I was fascinated.
tough being his roommate. That's for sure.
I'll bet, I'll bet. But I mean, you know, it's an amazing instrument, and
Yeah.
played well. It's just incredible.
Yeah.
But I took the resonator off to make it quieter. I put towels in under the head. I had a mute on the bridge. Did everything I could, but even at that, you'd hear this tick 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 instead of bling bling a bling bling bling,
Yeah.
and it drove her crazy. So I took the fifth string off and tuned it like a guitar and just used it on Dixieland gigs as needed.
Yeah.
So, but no, I'm not a banjo player.
Yeah. Well, you're a great guitar player. That's the rumor.
I
anyway.
enjoy it.
Yeah.
I really do.
Okay.
Always have.
So you're out here in Nashville. How long before something magical happened?
Well, within a couple of weeks, I got a job at Opryland. So I felt very
Wow.
lucky about that.
Tell us about that.
Well, it's funny. I had auditioned and didn't get it, and then played for a friend's audition, and he got it. So when I moved here, that was about 2 or 3 months later. He called me and said, "There's a group at Opryland that it's a female trio. They're doing like Andrew's Sisters, 40s stuff."
Oh.
And he said they need a guitar player. Is that something you might be able to do? I said, "Well, I think so, yeah," because I knew those songs. My dad had played a lot of that stuff, and so
Yeah.
I thought it's worth a try. So I came in and auditioned and got that gig. And actually they were looking for a bass player, and I'd been playing bass almost totally for the last 5 years. So I started out on bass, and then they decided they wanted to grow the band, and so I got the guitar gig, and that really is about the last time I played bass here in Nashville. So I've been a full-time guitarist for the last 50 years. So that was 2 weeks in. I mentioned coattailing with a couple of friends of mine who I knew who had publishing deals. And so I started writing a tree within my first year.
Wow.
And got my first cut was Ronnie McDowell's second single. He had "I Love You, I Love You, I Love You," or no, his first thing was "The King Is Gone," right after Elvis died. Huge #1, and we had his second single, not nearly as big. So that was my first big lick, and that was within a couple of years of being here. I wasn't knocking it dead as a writer. I was always playing in bands. But like my second year at Opryland, the girl who'd been the leader of that Andrews Sisters thing started a new concept, and it was she was playing piano, I was playing guitar. We had a bass player and drummer, and then 2 really great lead singers, guy and a girl. The drummer was the only one that didn't sing, so we had 5-part vocals. I was able to utilize those chords I learned from the Carpenters. If I wanted, we could have 4-part. And
Sweet.
and a lead singer, or we could have 3-part and duet singing lead. So the vocals in that band were outstanding. And one week, it was probably during CMAs or Radio Week, one of the things that happens here, DJ Week. A gentleman from England heard us. He was the head of Decca's publishing in London. He really liked the band and got in touch with us and ended up helping us get a label deal in London. So we got to go to London and record an album over there for Anchor Records. Unfortunately, Anchor Records, the name was portentous. They went down subsequent with the release of our second single. But nonetheless, getting to go to England to record an album was really exciting.
Great.
And our producer was a man named Ivor Raymond, and Ivor had been Dusty Springfield's co-producer and her arranger, and wrote several of her hits, including "I Only Want to Be With You."
Right.
And
Great song.
he was a blast. He was so much fun to work with and hang with, and we were treated royally while we were over there. And it was so interesting because, like on the flight over, it was like well, I guess I'm on my way now. The feeling very, just right on the cusp.
Yeah.
It didn't happen, but it was so much fun doing that. And then we got back here in the band. A guy left the band immediately, and then one of the girls left the band. And so I hate re-rehearsing. I don't mind rehearsing to learn something. I was writing all the charts for the vocals. It was a lot of work and a lot of effort that was paying off. But then as I saw it sort of down and just drowning, it was going away.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, I don't want to keep doing this just so we can keep doing the Opryland Hotel. We were the first residents at the Opryland Hotel when it opened. But I didn't want to just keep doing that kind of stuff. So to hang on between Opryland seasons, I was hanging out with some other guys, and that became a band that we had here called the Piggies. Piggies got a fairly good publishing deal. We were writing for A&M Records Publishing. And we were getting cuts on people like Joe Perry from Aerosmith and Bob Welch after he left Fleetwood Mac and Kid Rock and David Allan Coe and some other things. But
Wow.
we never got the record deal. That would have been nice if we had. But, that was fun too because even our demos were being produced by some really good people. Norbert Putnam, who is a fairly well-established producer here. And while we were working one day with Norbert, I can't even remember the guy's name now, but another writer came in who had tons of Elvis cuts, and they just started swapping Elvis stories. And the guy runs out, grabs some KFC, comes back. We're sitting around eating, and those guys are telling Elvis stories the whole time. And then it drifts into George Harrison stories because it worked with George Harrison. And I'm thinking,
Wow.
I'm so close. I am so close. I'm a person away from George Harrison, So, there was just always that sense of it's so close.
Yeah.
It's not happening this week, but it is imminent.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen.
Yeah.
So
The carrot's dangling.
Yeah, I never lost hope or felt that I was dead in the water.
Yeah.
There were times when things slowed down, but it never felt like I was dead in the water. And when I mentioned the Piggies, that was an outgrowth kind of in a way at Opryland after the Rush Hour, which was that 5-part vocal band, fizzled. I was doing the 50s shows. They asked me to do a sort of sha-na-na kind of band.
Nice.
We
I
had,
love the 50s.
We had the Jimmy and the Jets working on the weekend, and we had the Shabooms playing all week. So I was doing tons of 50s stuff. And we were at a party one night, and my 5-part vocal thing was going down the toilet, and I was just really frustrated about that. And Chuck Berry's Great 28 album came on, and I said to my wife, that's what I want to do now. I'm tired of all this other great effort and beautiful polished stuff. I just want to play some damn rock and roll again. And so that the Piggies really kind of grew out of that, and the 50s band stuff I was doing, and it really was fun to just get back to that very essential, fun rock and roll, kind of Beatlesque and all that.
Yeah.
So
Chuck Berry.
yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, I got a chance to play with Chuck then a few years after that, because out of the 50s things, at Opryland every Labor Day weekend at that point, they were doing they do a 50s revival show or an oldies show, package shows that would come in. Like the first year, I remember Little Anthony Imperials. Well, actually, at that point, it was just Little Anthony. Danny and the Juniors, maybe the Shirelles, or one of the other girl acts, I don't remember. And Wolfman Jack was the MC. And it was really like Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but when it was time for him to come on and do the MC thing between acts, the door to the bus would open and the pot smoke would come rolling out, and he'd come rolling out right behind it. And like he was introducing one act, ladies and gentlemen, okay, please welcome Danny and Little Anthony. He was so stoned, it was hilarious. But I got to do a bunch of those shows, and that was really cool. And then, like the 4th year, I think, instead of doing a package show, they just had Chuck Berry. And they asked me to be the band leader on that.
Excellent.
So I was playing bass and then got a keyboard player and a drummer. I thought Chuck really doesn't need another guitar player.
Yeah.
And that was a wonderful adventure.
Yeah.
All of us in the band really knew the material very well.
Yeah.
And the keyboard player was a great musician. He had great ears. I trusted my ears. And when Chuck came in, well, first of all, he pulls his guitar out of his case, and he's sitting there tuning, and it didn't sound real good. And at the Opry House, where the gig was, they have strobe tuners on either end of the drum riser. Now they have digital, I'm sure, but that time it was old strobe tuners with the circle wheels that go around.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to insult him, of course, but I said, Chuck, if you want, anybody can use those tuners. That's for all of us. And he said, oh, I don't trust them things. And I thought, man, I can tell. Because it was rough, but it sounded like Chuck, you know?
Yeah.
And I thought, this cat obviously doesn't use slinky strings. He uses the old heavy gauge strings, because when he bends the strings, it's not fluid like those of us who have been playing these songs for 20, 30 years.
Yeah.
He just bends them as far as they'll bend, and he's got hands like steel, and if it comes back in tune, it does. If it doesn't, well, that's Chuck, you know? And
Yeah.
the licks sound the way they sound because they're his licks. And so I made the mistake early on of saying, what tunes will we be playing tonight? And he looked at me like I was crazy. He said, well, Chuck Berry tunes. I thought, good enough. Those are what we're playing. But he didn't tell us what key. He didn't count them off. He didn't.
Right.
He didn't announce the songs. He just launched into them. And fortunately, we recognized everything, you know, by the intro or by the second measure you were in.
Right. You just better know them.
Yeah, I mean, I would turn around and yell the key at the other guys just in case, but you know, they caught on.
Yeah.
But that was a great show. That was somewhat legendary for me, getting to play with Chuck.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's got to be a great
Absolutely
memory.
was.
Yeah.
It's funny because I mentioned to you earlier that I had during my acting days I got to do a show with Jane Russell, the 18-hour bra girl and full-figured girl and all that. I was talking to somebody one day and he said, and this is just a few years ago, he said, so who all famous have you worked with? And I said, well, I got to do a tour one time with Jane Russell, and I could tell it wasn't registering. And I said, well, and I also I played bass for Chuck Berry, and I got to produce Dolly Parton on the Dollywood commercials. He said, I would lead with those. So I guess Dolly Parton and Chuck Berry are pretty big names.
Yeah, they are. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fun
Good
to do.
stuff. So you're out here. You've got a couple of cuts, right?
Yeah.
At that point.
Yes.
A lot of stuff going on. What happens then?
Well, the jingle thing really kicked in when my band broke up. I started doing producing jingles for a company here. A friend of mine who was working for them, who was the same friend, by the way, who had called me about the Opryland gig. I played for his audition. We would just keep helping each other along the way, ping-ponging.
Yeah.
But he called and said, the head of the company is going to Europe for the summer, and we need somebody to fill in. Would you be interested? And I said, sure, because I'd done some jingles in Dallas and, you know, kind of caught on how it was supposed to go. And so the first thing they had me working on was, I think it was a funeral home. And I realized, okay, this is going to be a little more challenging than I thought. I don't remember if they supplied the lyrics, but, you know, writing lyrics for a funeral home jingle is sort of interesting. Plus, I got halfway through the intro and realized I was already 30 seconds in. I thought, this isn't going to do for radio. So I had to, you know, I really had to hone what I was doing in the process.
Yeah. That's a tough one.
I ended up being in that
Funeral
company
home
for
jingle.
11 years and then started my own company after that, that we did for about 6 or 7 years. But that was how I was able to work with Dolly Parton. I wrote the jingles for Dollywood and did those for the first 5 years, I guess. And that was fun because I could tell the first year we did them, I mean, you can't have been here and not have heard Dolly over and over. So I knew her range. I knew what she could do. I knew how to produce it comfortably so she could just walk in and sing it. And but she was a little bit, I don't want to say nervous, but she was a little reserved when she first came in. And she was with the marketing director of Dollywood, who turned out to be just a wonderful guy. and her manager, Don Warden, who used to play steel for Porter Wagner. But everybody was very cordial, and she listened to it a couple times, and I think she had heard the demo. I hope she had heard the demo. So she went in and sang it down several times, and I'd make little suggestions, corrections here and there. And after about 10 or 15 minutes and several takes, I said, come on in, listen to what we got. I want to correct a few lines, plug in some things, but let's just see where we are. So she came in and listened down, and I said, you know what I'm not getting? It's just that over-the-top, exuberant, happy-go-lucky Dolly that I'm kind of used to hearing all the time. And she said, oh, I know what you're talking about, that bubbly Dolly shit. Walks out and nails it the first time. So I've always loved that story, that bubbly Dolly shit.
Dolly.
She knew who she was. She was very cool. The second year I worked with her, we did it out in L.A., and she came in with Dan Roman, the marketing director, and Dan says, Dolly, you remember Ronnie Brooks? She said, remember him? Hell, I got a crush on him. And I thought, I wonder how many times she has used that line. I'll bet several. But she
still feels good, though.
Yeah, and she was just always cool. I mean, just, she's such a pro, and she knows how to make everybody around her feel good and not take things too seriously. And, you can even tell when you see clips of her that lean even the slightest bit political. And she'll say, now, I told you I'm not going to say anything political. I want everybody to love me because I love everybody. And, she's just that kind of person. Yeah. She knows how to avoid controversy, and she knows there's no point in it.
Yeah.
So I always enjoyed working with her.
Good stuff.
Yeah.
So bring us up to date from there.
After the jingle thing, I'm trying to remember. Oh, I got into music licensing because toward the mid-'90s, we were seeing a shift. I think it was after Led Zeppelin did music for a Cadillac commercial, or Cadillac had licensed Whole Lotta Love, and I don't know how much they paid, but I'm sure it was a very hefty amount. And up to that point, major artists would not license their stuff. They saw that as a real come down, and selling out. But I'm sure Jimmy Page just saw a whole lot of money. And so then everybody was licensing things. And so our jingle business was just tanking. I mean, like a friend of mine who worked a lot in Chicago said this time last year there were like about 90 guys who were making a solid living as lead singers on commercials. This year there were 2. And so it was pretty evident that the jingle production was paling compared to licensing. So I started getting, learning how to license these things and we became a broker for those clients that wanted to license a piece of music instead of having us write a piece of music for them. And from that, a friend of mine who was a producer for several shows for CMT called me and said, I need somebody over here to help me license music for a show they were doing, the 40 Greatest Men of Country Music. Would you be interested in doing that? So I said, yeah, I kind of would. And that way I figured I'd still be available to do jingles as needed, but I'd be earning some money over here, not waiting to see, what was going to be available on the jingle side. Yeah. And from that, I got into doing music licensing for a few years, which I always tell people, if you have an opportunity to do that, don't. Because it's just really dry. You're contacting publishers and you're begging for their best rate and, going back and forth. And there was nothing creative about it. And having been a creative all my life, all of a sudden dealing in a administrative legal arena just wasn't very charming. Yeah. It was okay when I got to call A&M, Almo, to see about it, licensing something and talking to people I knew. But beyond that, it wasn't my favorite thing to do. From there, I was also doing a lot of writing articles for magazines, guitar stuff. comparing travel guitars and doing an article doing articles, I should say, for some magazines here, like on Gibson guitars and all sorts of, I don't even remember what else I was writing. The article on Gibson was interesting because I was talking to Miranda Lambert and Vince Gill and, some different Gibson artists.
Yeah.
When I talked to Vince, it was interesting, because I asked him how many Gibsons he had. He laughed. He said, nobody's ever asked me that before. Probably, I don't know, 40 or 50.
Wow.
And I said, how many did you lose in the flood? Because this was not long after the flood. And I could just hear, I was talking to him on the phone, but you could hear his face drop. And he said, about that many, 40 or 50. And I thought, oh, man, that hurts. Because he had some sweet guitars.
Yeah, I'm sure. Huh?
But anyway, so I was writing and editing for a while, doing magazine articles and online stuff. So that was interesting, and it got me to doing a few other editing jobs. And then I talked to a music retailer here that I'd done business with for years and years and years, and their website was awful. And by this time, I'd been doing some online stuff, and I said, you could really use some help. I would love to be part of that. And so I got hired on there. And even though working in the retail world was also not part of my ambition, at least I was working with guitars every day and guitarists. Yeah. And I got to see a lot of my friends and, guys who'd come into the store and knew me as a player, not as a retailer or a writer that way. Yep. So that was okay. And then not too long ago, I retired. So now I just do writers' nights, and that's where you and I met.
Yeah, yeah. And you were amazing. That was a fun night.
Oh, thank you.
I know your brother's the funny man, but you're pretty funny yourself.
Well, when you're doing those shows and everybody else is funny, it's like, well, I can't go out there and do normal songs.
Yeah, so you had some great funny songs.
Well, thank you. Thanks.
Yeah, I like it.
Some of the situations in which I had been writing earlier, like I was working on a concept. I was playing guitar on some things called VeggieTales. I don't know if you're familiar with VeggieTales. They were, it's a Christian animated series. Yeah. And it's like Larry the tomato and Bob the green peppers or cucumber or something. Anyway, they're these animated vegetables telling Christian stories to kids, and so it was a cute little series. And one of my business partners was doing a lot of the music for those things, and he'd have me come in and play guitar play a lot of the cues on those. And so we were talking one day. I had done a lot of Western and cowboy type jingles, and it got to the point where anytime they needed that influence on a spot, they'd just call me and say, do this, would you? Things for Dodge or Jeep or different beer things, whatever. So we tossed around the concept of Cowboy Pals, just an animated series with cowboys and Indians for girls and boys, that you could teach them some positive lessons and so forth. But here again, I thought, well, this stuff's got to be funny. It's got to be entertaining if it's going to hold kids' attention. Yeah. But it also needs to not be childish, because I didn't like that when I was a kid. I didn't like Captain Kangaroo. I didn't like Romper Room, because you could tell they were talking down to children. Yeah. When I finally saw Rocky and Bullwinkle, that was great stuff. I mean, those were the best cartoons to me, because they were lots of puns and very interesting stuff. So I wanted to bring that same level of humor and just maturity, if you will, into children's stuff. And so that's what prompted some of the comedic writing. And then from there, trying to keep up with my brother and Mark Allan and Mark Allan Barnett, who's a friend of ours. Yep,
we've had him on the show.
Yeah, when those cats were doing their shows, it was like, this is really funny stuff. So I first came into doing those writers things as my brother's stunt guitar player, and then they said, well, we're down a man this week. Do you want to do some songs? So that's how that all came to be.
And did you have some funny ones ready or no? Not yet?
I had one or two things that I could lean on. Yeah. And then I have to watch out too. And Mark Allan is a real disciple of this. I get pissed off at politics and crap in the system,
Yeah.
we'll say, and
Plenty of it, too.
and tend to write sometimes about that. And I've got to be very careful to, if I'm going to voice my displeasure, I want to keep it universal, because a lot of things that are wrong with the system are universal. They're not one side
Yeah.
or the other. They're the abuse of the people at the hands of the politicians, you know.
Yeah.
So if I'm going to write those things, I need to be careful to not point fingers at one
Yeah.
side or the other.
How you do it. Yeah.
So keeping humor in there helps a lot.
Yeah. I mean, I wrote a lot of funny songs many years ago, and I thought there was, what are you going to do with them?
Yeah.
And then I get here and meet Mark Allan Barnett and his crazy crew and Randy Brooks,
Yeah.
your brother. And I'm like, wow, maybe I need to go back into the shoebox that's under the bed.
Yeah. Well, for live shows, absolutely, because people are there to be entertained. And
Yeah.
I understand that. People don't want to be preached to.
Yeah.
You can maybe get away with one, but, people want to be entertained, and throwing in the humorous line here and there is great. And at these writers' nights, I go to so many writers' nights, and experienced writers get that. And even if they've got a slow tune or a ballad or a love song that speaks to them and has a good story behind it,
Yeah.
that's acceptable. But when you hear young writers who just pull out dreadful crap,
They haven't lived yet, so they really have nothing to write about at
yeah,
that
or
point.
or they aren't thinking in terms of the entertainment value of the song.
Yeah.
You can tell they're writing from their own little limited sphere of experience, no matter how old they are, as writers, and so that's why I don't do as many writers' nights as I probably should.
So were you around when your brother had the hit, Grandma Got Run Over by
I
a
was-
Reindeer? I mean, it built up over years.
Yes, it did. I was living here by that time. It was,
Yeah.
I think 1982 was when it started. I got
Yeah.
here in '76.
Were
He
you
had-
also baffled too? Like, how did?
In some ways, but I also understood that things happen. It's like the number of writers here who get a hit on a song that they never thought would be a hit. I mean,
Yeah.
Grandma Got Run Over was absolutely that, because Randy was playing in a band in Reno, and this duet, Elmo and Patsy. Elmo is a vet in the San Francisco area, and he heard the song and he said, "Would you mind if we record that?" And Randy was like, "Sure, nothing's going to happen. You just never know.
Yeah.
You never know." And I kind of had a similar situation. So my band, the Piggies, we wrote a lot of original stuff. Started out pretty Beatlesque, but was growing into different things along the way. And we also did a little bit of comedy from time to time, and we tended to make fun of the acts that we played with that we didn't like. We opened for a Southern rock band one time, and it was just these big fat-ass guys, ugly as hell, not great musicians, and just kind of, ugh. We thought, what on earth do these guys think people see in them? So we wrote a song mocking them, called "Shit Kickin' Redneck Rock and Roll Son of the South." Well, it wasn't long after that I got a call from David Allan Coe, who, if you know David Allan Coe, he's a pretty scary Southern rock kind of guy himself, but country. Anyway, it was when we still had answering machines. I got home from the publishers one day, and here's this long rambling message of, "Yeah, this is Ronnie Brooks. This is David Allan Coe. Hey, listen, I heard that song you wrote, that Son of the South. Man, that's a great song. But I was talking to old Waylon, and we agreed there's no way you're going to get any radio off that." And I thought, well, no shit, because we were talking about these fat-ass guys and just running them down. And, I brushed my teeth with Lone Star beer because my darling likes the smell. Stuff like that, So it was just
Funny stuff.
But he wanted to rewrite it as a biker song. And we said, well, sure, we'll have 2 copyrights and do what you will. Well, he ended up having it as an album, a title cut. So here he is on the cover with the Confederate flag draped on him, long hair, rock and roll son of the South. And then a few years later, when I was working at CMT doing music licensing, I knew they were doing these outlaw shows. And I knew that David Allan Coe and Kid Rock were going to be doing a show. And I said to the producer or the director, I said, if you need to use a song, why, I have this one that David Allan Coe did. Ha, 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 okay, go away. Well, a few weeks later, one of the ADs, one of the assistants on the show came and said, did you write that song, Son of the South? And I thought, oh man, I'm going to get in trouble because they found out that I'm working on both sides of the show and double dipping and all. I said, yeah, I did. He said, did you know that Kid Rock cut that as Son of Detroit? I said, no, I had no idea. I looked it up. The album had been out for a year. It had already sold 1 million copies, and I had no idea.
So how does that work at that point?
Well, then the checks start coming in. That's how it works. So anyway.
You didn't have to do anything? Or
I didn't have to do anything.
Or?
And because it had already been recorded once, he didn't have to get permission. The initial artist, the first recording, they have to get permission from the publisher.
Got it.
But in this case, they didn't. But you know, the money kept coming in for that. That was very, very nice.
Good for you.
Yeah. So I mean, you really just never know.
Yeah.
Those stories are out there. So I wish it had been a single. That would have been a whole lot better. But we take what we can get.
Well, you're blessed, dude. I mean, this is amazing.
I truly am.
Truly blessed.
And I know that. And you know, that's
God.
If anything has helped keep me humble, that's it.
Yeah. I've really enjoyed your stories.
Well, thanks.
You going to play some music for us today?
Well, you made that threat, so I guess I'm going to need to.
All right. A couple of them?
Okay.
Okay.
If you're going to be that way.
All right. Well, thank you, Ronnie. This has been a great interview. It was great to have you.
Thank you.
And Ronnie's going to play some music for us. Ladies and gentlemen, the Ronnie Brooks.
So here's one of those songs I was talking about from the Cowboy Pals concept that never got produced. Been 4 weeks in the saddle with 1,000 head of cattle and a herd of dirty cowboys from Cheyenne. Missouri's still a ways off, and it's days before I'll bathe off. So if you see me coming, you best be running upwind. How yucky I am, how yucky I am. Got dirt from last October under my brim. How yucky I am, how yucky I am. But once I get cleaned up, I'll start getting yucky again. Soon we'll hit Kansas City, where the girls are rich and pretty, and the stockyards smell like me and all of my friends. There's so much dirt between us, ain't enough soap there to clean us. But if we get lucky, them girls might like yucky men. How yucky I am, how yucky I am. These boots are caked with pies I keep stepping in. How yucky I am, how yucky I am. But once I get cleaned up, I'll start getting yucky again. Can't soak down at the fish pond, 'cause I'd turn it into mud. Can't even take a tub bath without curdling the suds. I need some place to savor, get clean down to my spurs, and then get me a razor, 'cause these clothes are growing fur. How yucky I am, how yucky I am. This beans and coffee diet's rough on my friends. How yucky I am, how yucky I am. But once I get cleaned up, I'll start getting yucky. Another 100 years we'll just stop into Buc-ee's. But until then, I'll keep getting yucky again. Here you go, partner. Here's a sort of close to normal song. She left the front porch light on to try to help me find the front lawn. But the sun and I were both lit up by the time I hit the door. I said that I'd be home by midnight. Now I'm crawling in at daylight. That's just another reason we don't trust me anymore. We don't let me use sharp objects. We don't let me light the grill. We don't let me near the old John Deere since I plowed the football field. There ain't a single situation that I ain't messed up before, and that's why we don't trust me anymore. All those bathroom window sneak-ins, poker nights turned into weekends. Sunday mornings found me sleeping in the flower bed next door. All those all those birthdays I was late for, all the late night blue light escorts. It ain't hard to find a reason we don't trust me anymore. We don't take me round the in-laws. We don't let me drive the car. We don't take me to prayer meetings lest they're preaching at the bar. There ain't a single situation that I ain't screwed up before, and that's why we don't trust me anymore. We don't let me go to weddings. We don't let me near the band. 'Cause once I start to drinking, the whole dang room gets out of hand. There ain't a single situation I ain't shot to hell before, and that's why we don't trust me anymore. Yeah, that's why we don't trust me anymore. Thank you, neighbor. I mentioned earlier about getting pissed off about politics and things like that, and this sort of grew out of that. The only thing worse than that is when people bitch so much about it that it just makes matters worse. So I wrote this one right here. Well, every time I turn on the TV set, somebody's stirring up a hornet's nest. He said that, she said this, they're like monkeys slinging poop. Well, there's nothing you can do to make it any better. You beat a dead horse, you just make it deader. You change my mind, says nobody ever, so here's what you need to do. STFU, nobody cares about your point of view. You got opinions, yeah, well I do too, so just STFU. Rainbow, black, red, white, and blue, we all believe what we're saying is true. So just play nice, turn off the news, and STFU, STFU. Well, there's TV preachers thumping their Bibles, begging for money. They call that revival, calling me a sinner while they lie like a devil, and I wonder what would Jesus do? So I just remember those words he said, the ones throwing stones ain't the ones being blessed. So pray a little more and preach a little less, and just STFU. STFU, nobody cares about your point of view. You got opinions, yeah, well I do too, so just STFU. Rainbow, black, red, white, and blue, we all believe what we're saying is true. So just play nice, turn off that news, and STFU, STFU. Now I love this town, I love my country, even though lately things have been bumpy. People everywhere getting all kinds of grumpy, thinking they got something to prove. You can grind your axe, you can vent your spleen, you can be polite, you can be obscene, but either way nobody gives a hill of beans, so just STFU, okay? STFU, nobody cares about your point of view. You got opinions, yeah, well I do too, so just STFU. Rainbow, black, red, white, and blue. We all believe what we're saying is true. So just play nice, turn off the damn news, and just STFU. STFU. I didn't say F you, but I will if you don't. STFU. Thank you, brothers and sisters. I mentioned earlier about the Cowboy Pals concept that never came to fruition, and how it would be fun to do something for girls and boys, but to do it with cowboys and Indians, and to not have anybody be the villain, not have any bad guys. So I came up with this idea to present it from the Native Americans' point of view. In our little town lived a man named Red Eagle. We all loved the stories he told about how his grandfather lived on the prairie and hunted the great buffalo. When hunting had ended, the braves would return and start up a victory dance. But the chief, who was wise, would lift up his eyes and say we should first give our thanks. And he'd say, remember who painted the sky, remember who planted the mountains, remember who filled up the rivers and streams with so many fish you can't count them. Be proud of the things you accomplish, but when you feel mighty and high, remember whose stars lead you home every night. Remember who painted the sky. He told how they planted the corn every spring and how they would dance to bring rain. They'd ride their wild ponies and chase locomotives that steamed their way west across the plains. They followed the buffalo into the sunset that still blazes yellow and red. And Red Eagle's stories still live in our dreams, and his stars still watch over our beds. And he'd say, remember who painted the sky, remember who planted the mountains, remember who filled up the rivers and streams with so many fish you can't count them. Be proud of the things you accomplish, but when you feel mighty and high, remember whose stars lead you home every night. Remember who painted the sky, remember whose stars lead you home every night. Remember who painted the sky.
You've been listening to the Live and On Board podcast with your host, Tony Milazzo. Join our Facebook group, Live and On Board Podcast. Subscribe to Live and On Board Podcast on YouTube. You can email us at liveandonboardpodcast@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram and TikTok at Tony Milazzo Live. Thanks for listening, and share this with a friend.